great pleasures in my work is that I often get to train healthcare professionals. You know who you are. In that world, as you know, nurses give of their gorgeous spirits day in and day out to attend to the physical and emotional needs of their patients. They make sure their patients are getting the right sleep and exercise and nutrition. They bring great skill to the care of others. But many over the years have reported to me that they feel a concern that the skills they bring in their work, they struggle to use in their own lives. That they feel they neglect sometimes their own health and well-being. And it's introduced a question for me to think, are there skills that you and I bring to our work? Every day, as we tirelessly serve our clients day in and day out, what are we doing in that role that perhaps we could leverage for greater impact in other ways? What do we do in training? We ask thoughtful questions. We know the objectives that we bring to every day in the classroom, and we create a safe space for learning. What if we could take all of these things that we do so well and begin to explore new ways of using those skills to promote greater growth for our learners, but also even in our own personal lives? So I'd like to explore in great detail each of these three responsibilities. I'll start with this idea of asking thoughtful questions. I love transitions. I love that proverbial fork in the road, that moment when we ask ourselves, what do I want to do? But this is a big question for a lot of people, and it's actually very difficult for some of us to answer that question. We see this in our classrooms. Those of us who teach influencer know that when we ask people to discover their vital behaviors, it's actually really hard for people to figure out what do they want to do and when. I mean, that's why Vital Smarts offers Applied Influencer, to help people figure that out. I'd like to offer the idea that perhaps the questions that we ask of each other in our classrooms and day-to-day in our conversations might actually be able to help people answer for themselves that big question that they carry around in their hearts. What do I want to do? I've had real moments of clarity answering this question for myself. True, beautiful, joyful moments of clarity. In particular, one of these moments hit me in the form of a delicious bite of waffle that I ate 13 years ago. The second I took that bite of waffle, I knew exactly in that moment that I needed to do something important. Why? Because of a question asked of me 3 years earlier. 3 years earlier, when I was working in a mindless job, and looking for love in all the wrong places. I knew there was work to be done, but I didn't know what that was supposed to look like. And then one beautiful summer day, my friend asked me a question. What would your perfect day look like? I remember we were sitting on a pier overlooking the water, and we took turns answering this question for each other. We wrote down our answers, and it was such fun imagining with tremendous clarity all the big and small details that our perfect day would include. And I'd like to share with you some of what I wrote down for myself that day. I was painting on a beach. I was wearing a long, flowing white dress. And afterwards, I walked across the warm sand barefoot to go have breakfast with my husband and my children. And the breakfast was delicious. And the best part about it was that I didn't cook it. And after breakfast, I changed into some high-powered work clothes, and I went and I gave a rockin' speech to some executives. Now, you have to understand, at the time of this exercise, I was single without prospects. I was working in a call center, delivering technical training classes to the masses. And my current life looked really different from the perfect day that I was imagining. But this perfect day sounded really fun to me. And I started to ask myself, could I be having more fun? And I realized I could take a painting class. I could buy a white dress. So I did. And then 3 years later, I bit into that bite of that perfect waffle. And I had tasted that waffle before in my imagination. And I knew the moment I ate that waffle that I did not cook, that I would like very much to marry the man who made it for me. Because I had felt deep in my gut a visceral memory of having enjoyed waffles with him for years. And I wanted that to be my everyday. And so that question all those years ago led me to finding these people in my life and brought you people into my life. Many of us in our Crucial Conversations classes are telling our learners what to do. And then we hope they leave and have a moment later where they realize it's time to do that thing and that they will do it. But the reality is many times they're not realizing that moment has come and they fail to do those things that we want them to be doing. I'd like to offer that if you and I can ask different kinds of questions, ones that allow our learners to really experience the answers in a very real way, that they might then have a visceral memory of that crucial moment, and it will become very clear to them later once it has arrived, and they will be more likely to do what it is that they've practiced in class. The question is a powerful tool. I love this quote. You can tell whether a man is clever by his answers. You can tell whether a man is wise by his questions. Here's the thing, guys. We're really clever, aren't we? We got some good answers. But could we perhaps become a bit more wise? Questions come in all shapes and sizes. And so I'd like to explore what some of those look like. We know the question can inspire. The lovely Sheryl Sandberg for years has been asking, what would you do if you weren't afraid? Some questions incriminate. Did the senator cheat on his wife? This one's usually followed with more to come on the evening news. Right? And then there are those thousands of questions that we use to berate ourselves all day long, those hurtful questions that turn inward. We say to ourselves, what is wrong with me? And sometimes we direct that judgment outwardly. Did you see what she was wearing? There are questions that offer intrigue. Will you have dinner with me? And then there are those questions that examine. Now, this is familiar territory for us, but what if we could take these questions and challenge ourselves as trainers to ask, how deeply did I challenge my learners today? Or to motivate ourselves to ask, how might I push them even further? Perhaps I could probe to discover, what questions did I ask today? I think when we change our questions, we can make ourselves better trainers and perhaps even better humans. What does my perfect day look like? How do I want to be remembered when I'm gone? How do I want my learners to describe their experience? See, questions are building blocks that unlock possibilities, big and small. And we use questions with our clients, we use questions with our learners. But what if we could challenge ourselves to treat ourselves like we are our own clients? I'm my own client. And as I've been digging into that idea, I've discovered that a crucial moment has arisen for me. This idea of checking in to say, how do I do when it's time to review? So as I'm offering those unscripted, on-the-fly, in-the-moment questions that quiz for understanding in the classroom, could I step up my game a little bit? And so I went back to Bloom's taxonomy for some ideas. Do you guys remember Bloom's taxonomy? Okay, we've got a few hands here. If you don't remember, Bloom's taxonomy was developed by educators in 1956 for testing purposes. And it divides learning objectives into 3 domains: the knowing domain, the feeling domain, and the doing domain. And the goal, of course, is to motivate educators to focus on all 3 of those domains in order to create a more holistic education. And so we can look at how the use of questions allows us to progress through the different domains. So if I'm checking in for knowledge, I might offer a question that sounds like, do you remember it? But then to move to check for comprehension, I might ask, can you explain it? If I'm checking in around application, can you use or apply it? Analysis begs the question, can you break it apart? Synthesis, can you create it on your own? And finally, evaluation, can you determine if it is good? So you can see the evolution of questions, they evolve in their complexity, and all of these are available to us in the classroom. I have been noticing that I have some default questions. My default questions, does that make sense? And what questions do you have? Now, those are tracking to see, are my learners with me? Useful. But what I'm realizing is that this forces my learners to to come up with their own questions to test me? What if I could be the one to do the work for them? Could I take them to a deeper place by challenging them to think a bit more deeply? So instead of just saying, are you with me? Maybe I could have them walk with me. Questions that might get me there could sound like this. How would you explain this in your own words? Why is this important? What's the risk of not doing it? Why don't we do this? Why should we? Now, one of the ideas that I've been playing with that I really like is when I'm teaching Master My Stories, often I teach it and I wrap up the beginning part right before a break. And when they come back, it's time for me to quiz, do a little review. And so one of the things I've started saying is, okay guys, I know you're all gonna go home and read your Crucial Conversations books and you're gonna have them by your bedside. As you're marching around the house over the next few days, reading your book, carrying it with you, you get to the chapter titled Master My Stories, you throw your bookmark in there and you leave it on the coffee table. And then you have a house guest who pops over and picks up your book, opens it up to the chapter titled Master My Stories and says, what does that mean? You have a minute, turn to your partner, tell them how you'd answer that question. It's amazing how quickly I can discover if they get it or not. Are there ways we can begin to explore different questions that can take our learners to a different place? Ultimately, we're trying to get them to go solo, so here are the kinds of questions that help us do that. In my story, what skill could be used here? What would it sound like? Based on my example, what coaching would you offer? What would make that better? Lots of questions to consider. I want you to check in with yourself. Turn to the person sitting next to you. Answer these questions. What are your go-to questions when you're quizzing for understanding in the moment? And is there another way that you could explore asking some of those questions that might take your learners to a deeper, different place? Take a minute, see what you can come up with. Okay, let me pause you there. We've been talking about how we can go a little bit more deeply with our questions and ask more from our participants and maybe even from ourselves. Now, as we move into the next objective, knowing our objectives, it reminds me that when we do this in class, we manage every minute of our precious 16 hours towards our objectives. If we don't know our objectives, time will get away from us. And in our lives, we have precious few minutes. What if we could manage our time to our objectives in life? When I did that perfect day exercise, it became very clear to me what I wanted to do, how I wanted to spend my time, what my work wanted to look like, who I would love. You have likely answered so many of those questions for yourselves. My guess is that those questions have brought you into this room. Perhaps you're feeling like you're in a really wonderful place. When we effectively look at the balance of our lives, we're looking across a continuum at all of the major elements that comprise our time. And my list might look different than yours, but I think it's always interesting to look and explore, do the categories of our lives feel like they are reflecting our deepest values? Or is it possible that we might want to spend some time, give a little extra attention to any of these? And that's my challenge to you, is to think about what might warrant a little bit of your attention today. On the relational side, friends, family, romance, community, might any of that warrant a bit more investment? Are you ready to take the next step intellectually? Maybe it's time to step forward into that stretch assignment at work, pick up a new book, go on a trip. Perhaps it's time to give yourself permission to contribute to the world of ideas in new, meaningful ways. Or perhaps you're ready to be a mentor, to find someone at work or a young person in your community who could learn with you and from you. Are your financial goals in alignment with your values? I have a friend who has contracted with her long-distance sister. Rather than spending money on holiday presents, they pool those monies into a fund that they use to travel together. Research shows that we actually report greater happiness when we pay for experiences rather than buying things. Do your financial choices match the things that you care about? Spiritually, physically, artistically, are you where you want to be? Or is there room for more self-expression? Perhaps a greater connection to finding beauty or art or culture in your life? Is your environment working for you? Or is it time to shake things up at work, at home? Maybe it's time to purge the old wardrobe or rearrange some furniture, drag a table and some chairs out to the patio to get more sunshine in your life. What category would you like to spend just a little more time on this week? I'm going to ask you guys to weigh in here. What one step, we'll move to that one. What one step can you take in the next 7 days? Wonderful, you've picked your categories. Now go one step further. Can you identify one baby step? Go to the zoo, take a walk, physical activity, work on your lyrics. Somebody's got a song. 5 days a week, taking your steps. Thank you. Thank you for sharing and inspiring us. We'll move forward. One of the other things that we do, besides managing time to our objectives in training, is we create a safe space for learning. We know that when learners come to deliberate practice, they get very distracted by what's going on in their minds. And when left unchecked, people's stressful conversations will get in the way of their ability to move forward in the learning process. Sometimes we hear them saying things like, I can't do this, I screwed it up, I'm no good at this, I think I'll sit this one out. And when we hear those messages, we jump in with action and we try to reframe these messages to create safety, because when people are not feeling safe, they are too distracted to enter into the vulnerability of being in a learning phase. And so we reframe messages for people. We say, no one expects perfection. What did you learn here? What help do you need? Let's try it again. But sometimes we talk to ourselves with some ugly little voices and we don't notice them. See, if we can't hear those ugly little voices, we can't reframe them. So my challenge to you is to figure out, what are your ugly voices saying to you that are helping you feel safe, that are keeping you from taking risks, that are preventing you from moving forward, because they might be keeping you stuck in ways that are not serving you well. If you can begin to notice what they sound like, and sometimes they sound like this: I'd like to start writing, but I have nothing to contribute. I'd like to apply, but I'm not qualified. I'd like to do that, but I don't have time. What if we could reframe with empathy, help, or a gentle nudge toward action? We reframe that by saying to ourselves, everyone has a unique voice. You deserve to be heard. What can you do to develop your skills, your confidence? If it's important, how can you make time? We know how to do this for others. What if we could drown our own ugly voices with the same kindness that we offer to one another? My big idea is this: you can be as intentional in designing your life as you are in designing your workday, and so can I. So next time you find yourself dragging chairs around before a class, ask yourself, what needs to change in your environment at work or home to spark the creativity, efficiency, and connection that you crave? Next time you're setting out food for your participants, use that as a moment to consider, how will you plan your nutrition, your exercise, your sleep for the week? As you offer a gentle word of kindness or compassion to someone else, listen for the ugly little voices in your mind that might need to be quieted. I'll sum up by saying, I think it's time to put a twist on the old golden rule here. Perhaps it's time to do unto yourself that which you would do unto others. With a bit more mindful intention, with a bit more daily planning, by offering ourselves just a bit more empathy and compassion, I can't even imagine what kind of greater impact you and I might be able to make on this world, this beautiful world that needs us all so very much. Thank you.